flagship publications, which is the Global Innovation Index report. Allow me to briefly preface his remarks. This year's Global Innovation Index, or GII, which is on its 14th edition, presents the worldwide innovation landscape and annual performance, ranking 130 economies. This year's edition was released in the context of the continuing COVID-19 pandemic, which has taken a grim toll on lives and livelihoods everywhere. Let me extend my sympathies to families adversely affected by the virus, and I hope everyone's keeping safe and well. The pandemic, however, has also given us many examples of human ingenuity, resilience, and adaptability. Indeed, the GI 2021 finds that innovative sectors of the global economy have remained strong despite the severe disruptions. And universities like Universitas and Tunas Pembangunan have certainly played an important role in continuing the drive for innovation. But to overcome the pandemic and build back better, we all need to continue to create intangible assets and support the translation of ideas to game-changing products. This is the ultimate goal of the Global Innovation Index, to help countries discover what works best in producing a good ecosystem so people can achieve their highest potential, innovating and creating to improve lives everywhere. The Global Innovation Index 2021 finds that governments and enterprises in many parts of the world have scaled up their investments in innovation despite the economic downturn caused by the pandemic. As a result, scientific output, expenditures in research development, IP filings, and venture capital deals have all grown in 2020 and continue to grow in 2021. But much effort will be needed to vanquish the pandemic, and so GII continues to help countries. In these challenging times, the world needs more innovation, not less.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Ong. Of course, this event will not be the same as good without these leaders. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to introduce these two presidents behind the continuous success of NEUST Philippines and UTP Indonesia. Let's start with Dr. Feliciana P. Jacoba, the president of NEUST.
First, allow me to greet our partners from Indonesia, particularly the Universitas Tunas Pembangunan, led by Dr. Tresna Siomardi, our highly esteemed keynote and resource speakers, who will be properly introduced later, to the university officials and organizers, to all our participants from different parts of the globe. Salamat pagi. Good morning, friends. I searched the internet and I got these bits of information from time.com, which cites that in 1903, brothers Orville and Wilbur Wright made what many consider the world's first successful heavier-than-air flight. The flight catapulted the brothers and their machine, the Wright Flyer, into history books. It also propelled them over the decade to come into courtrooms through Europe and North America. Citing in 1906 patent for their flying machine, the Wrights claimed these principles as their own and charged their competitors with intellectual property theft. Fighting back in court, the Wrights' competitors claimed the theory behind the machines as the common property of humanity and argued that the Wrights' patent pertained only to the mechanics of their airplane itself. In waging this battle, the Wrights proved themselves more than pioneers in aviation. They also proved themselves pioneers of what sometimes known as patent trolling. the controversial modern practice of suing competitors for infringement that fall beyond the scope of one's patent. Every participant in this webinar knows that intellectual property, or IP, to call it shortly, refers to creations out of ingenuity. It may be an invention, literary or artistic work, design or symbol, name and image used in business. IP includes patents, copyright, trademark, trade dress, and other trade secrets. Why should we ensure that IP rights are protected? Can we not just share our invention or innovation to others for the sake of the greater number of people? If your invention benefits the humanity, then why should you be hesitant in sharing this to the world? Republic Act 8293, known as Intellectual Property Code of the Philippines, provides that the state shall protect and secure the exclusive rights of scientists, inventors, artists, and other gifted citizens to their intellectual property and creations, particularly when beneficial to the people, for such periods as provided in this act. Reports and complaints related to IP rights soared in 2020, according to IPOPIL Director Anne Edilion during the online meeting of the House Committee on the Creative Industry and Performing Arts. Director Edilion said that they attribute such increase partially on the fact that because of COVID, everything has gone online. And of the 190 complaints and reports received, 54 are related to piracy and 67 are on counterfeiting of goods. You can find it from newsinfo.inquirer.net. In the academe such as ours, IP rights means acknowledging and protecting the initiative and hard work of a faculty. As such, would inspire more persons to do research. With the IPR, published researches which are easily accessed can be protected from copying and undue infringement from others. With this joint conduct of webinar on IPR, Indonesia and the Philippines, we are really glad, and our partner institution, of course, the Universitas Tunas Pembangunan, will benefit our researchers, inventors, and innovators whose sweat, time, and resources is spent on their noteworthy output can motivate other potential investors, innovators, and researchers to create new ideas and innovate things that will improve people's lives. The university shall commit itself to this worthy task and shall continuously provide tangible and intangible incentives to all faculty and other university personnel whose work benefits not only the university, but the larger community as well. The opportunity to innovate and to create new things is infinite. Material resources are only secondary to this person. The most important thing to be present in us is the desire to do new things and create new ideas that will help solve the problems of our society. Coupled with cooperation and collaboration and desire to achieve our common goal, there is little that can be done, but greater are the chances of achieving more with God's blessings. My appreciation to those who organized this intellectual webinar, the men and women of the NEST ITSO team and that of the Universitas Tunas Pembangunan. Thank you very much and congratulations. To all our participants, thank you very much for sharing your time with us. And of course, to our resource speaker, our appreciation, recognition for accepting our invitation to be with us today and share your thoughts and insights. So all of you, have a great day and of course, a more productive day. Keep safe and healthy, everyone. God bless us all.
Maraming salamat. Thank you, President Jacoba. Next, I'm also honored to introduce the President of the UTP, Dr. Tresna Sumardi.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. And welcome to my message session in this international webinar on intellectual property, sharing the best practices of the Philippines and Indonesia. It is an honor for me to be in the midst of official academics and experts in the field of IP, and also involve the regional or global WIPO office. And I would like to thank you all for distinguished speakers, Dr. Marilyn Hippolito, Research Director Neust, Dr. Feliciana Jacoba, President Neust, Mr. Peter Willimot, Officer in charge WIPO Singapore, Mr. Andrew Michael Ong, Director Division for Asia and Pacific WIPO, Mr. Ragil Yoga, Edi, Director IP Management BRIN, Mr. Adrian Sablan, ITSO Program Head and IPO Philippines, Dr. Haryuni, IP Focal Person UTP, Mr. Kenneth Armas, Director Neust Production Department, Mr. Alan Paul, Esteban Division Head, Neust ITSO, and last but not least, my colleague, Mr. Muhammad Ali Yafi, Director of International Office of UTP. Ladies and gentlemen, IPR can be used as benchmarks in seeing the progress and economic development of a nation, so that with the increasing number of intellectual property rights owned by a nation, it can be used as a driver of economic development and increase the competitiveness of product produced within the country. In relation with ASEAN has identified as critical component of the Asian Economic Community Blueprint, which outlines specific measures that member nations must implement to turn ASEAN into a highly creative and competitive arena. With protecting IPR is an excellent initiative of member states to foster innovation-based economics and will enable companies, entrepreneurs, inventors, artists, and creators to strive in a fair and competitive market for goods and services. Ladies and gentlemen, in relation to the university, researchers and engineers in universities are expected to have a high awareness of the importance of acquiring intellectual property right. In teaching, research, and service activities, universities have an important role as development to produce new discoveries in various fields of technology. IPR promotion and protection will accelerate industrial growth, create new jobs, encourage economic change, and improve the quality of human life that meets the need of the wider community. Ladies and gentlemen, I look forward this collaboration to the NEVA GIVA, University of Science and Technology, Neust, and Universitas Tunas Pembangunan UTP. By conducting today's webinar on intellectual property gives enlightenment and awareness to the students, faculty, and private industries in their respective countries on the importance of the intellectual property. We also thank the participant of the webinar, student, lecturer, researcher from universities, and the R&D department of state and private companies, artists, and so on and so forth. Thanks to the committee, as a team, work very well between UTP and Neust. Happy webinar. I hope the webinar goes smoothly and productively. May God always bestow His grace and bounty on all of us. Stay safe and healthy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sumardi. Terima kasih. Now, let's begin this webinar with our first keynote speaker with the topic Global Innovation Index. Our keynote speaker is a graduate of Bachelor of Arts in Communication from the University of Canberra and pursued Masters of Science in Management at the University College of Dublin, National University of Ireland. He has been with the World Intellectual Property Office for the last 9 years and has been the officer in charge of the WIPO Singapore from 2020 to present. Prior to his assignment as OIC at the WIPO Singapore, he worked as Senior Program Officer, providing intellectual property technical assistance and capacity development in Asia-Pacific region, as well as undertaking stakeholder engagement to promote cooperation and increase awareness of intellectual property. He also has been the Director of Marketing and Customer Engagement of IP Australia, responsible for a range of communication, outreach, and education activities of IP Australia. Ladies and gentlemen, the officer in charge in WIPO Singapore, Mr. Peter Willimot.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. It's my pleasure to speak at this webinar today. I'd like to thank Dr. Tresna P. Somadi for his very insightful opening remarks, and those of the representative from Neust also for her welcome and introductory remarks. I would also like to thank the organisers for their kind invitation to WIPO to be part of this event, and it comes at a very timely moment in history where humanity is facing so many challenges. Immediately, the pandemic is a huge challenge for the world, but also more long-term will be the climate emergency, food security, water source, waste management, so many issues, so many things humans must overcome. And the base of the way we will overcome all of these things is through innovation. And innovation happens more efficiently when there is collaboration. And that's why I was very pleased to hear Dr. Somadi mention the importance of collaboration. And indeed, this event is an excellent collaboration between two educational institutions. And I really encourage and appreciate the effort that goes into the collaboration. And I hope it bears fruit for US and UTP moving forward. It's my pleasure today to share with you some information on innovation. And it's mainly in a publication known as the Global Innovation Index that my organization, WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization, releases annually. So firstly, a little bit about WIPO or WIPO. We are actually a specialized agency of the United Nations. So we operate on the same basis as some of our more famous sister organizations. So the WHO has been in the news a lot recently. So we are same footing as them, same as UNESCO, the International Labour Organization, International Monetary Fund. So what does that mean? Well, the key thing is those two dot points down the bottom of this slide, that we are not for profit. So although we administer the international IP system, we don't do it in a way to make a profit. So we are made up of 193 member states. Different economies can come to Geneva and discuss with us about IP matters and whether the IP system is still meeting the needs of the world. We are based in Geneva in Switzerland, but we also have external offices in a number of countries, and I'm joining you from our Singapore office, where we have a small team that has responsibility for the ASEAN region. In total, WIPO has over 1,300 employees from more than 110 countries. And indeed, the two host organizations today from Indonesia and the Philippines are very well represented in WIPO. Indeed, my boss and the Deputy Director General of WIPO is Indonesian, Mr. Hassan Clive, and the Director of the Asia and the Pacific Division is a Filipino, Mr. Andrew Ong, who we heard from earlier today. Now, unique within the UN system, we are actually self-funded. So some of the services we provide do incur a fee for those who use them. This is quite unique in the UN system. You would have heard in the news when the US threatened to remove funding from the WHO. That would have caused a massive issue for the delivery of many of their programs. WIPO is not reliant on member state donations. We rely on fees for the services, but the fees are structured in a way that we don't make profit. Just briefly in Singapore, we just have a small team. At the moment, there's 3 of us, and we largely promote WIPO services in the ASEAN region. We act as WIPO's service center for the ASEAN region and deliver IP office business solutions. So in Indonesia, we work with the DGIP to help them build a better IT system. And same in Philippines, we work with the IP Office of the Philippines, IPO-Phil, to ensure that their IT system is as good as it can be and that the data contained within IP databases is easily accessible. So, very quickly, what does WIPO do? Well, we provide a policy forum where our member states can come to try and shape balanced international IP rules for the world. So we want to make sure the IP system internationally works just as well for an SME in Jakarta as it would for a large corporate organization like Jollibee in the Philippines. The IP system has to work just as well for everyone. Now, to do so, we provide global services that enable businesses, organizations, universities, inventors to protect their IP across borders and to resolve disputes in a fair and amicable way. So, as you may know, the IP system is territorial based. So, if you were to apply for a trademark, to try and register a trademark in Indonesia, for example, today, if that was granted by the DGIP, you would have a legal right on that trademark just in Indonesia. But should you wish to open outlets, so if it's a coffee store, you want to open outlets in Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam, then you would need to seek protection for your trademark, try to register your trademark in those countries also. WIPO provides a service that enables you to protect a trademark, for example, in other countries with one application. Same with innovation. If you have a patent in Indonesia, you may seek to protect or obtain patent protection in other countries around the world through WIPO's PCT service. The third thing we do is connect IP systems through our IT assistants, because the IP system is very much based on new, must be new. How do you know if something is new? Well, you must search the database. And the global database helps to do that. We offer cooperation and capacity building programs to enable all to use IP for economic, social, and cultural development. So that means training programs for government officials, training programs for technology transfer officers. We try and support the Technology and Innovation Support Centres, TISCs, or in the Philippines, known as ITSOs. And lastly, because of our role, we have a lot of information coming through us and then out again. So we collect some of this, analyze it, and produce different reports. And one of those reports on IP information is the Global Innovation Index. And that's going to be the focus for my topic today, the state of play of innovation in the world, and then drill down a little bit to look at innovation in Indonesia and the Philippines, because they're our two host organizations, but also touch a little bit on innovation based on the Global Innovation Index in ASEAN. So let us first look at what the Global Innovation Index is. WIPO wanted to produce a resource that would help member states improve the journey towards a better way to measure and understand innovation. And by doing that, we want to provide governments with data so they can implement policies and good practices that foster innovation by firstly having the data on innovation. Then economies can evaluate their innovative performance. They can look at areas where they may have some weaknesses and try and improve that by changing policy or having initiatives to help drive aspects in those areas of their economy. We wanted to help to shape innovation measurement, because innovation is a very diverse thing. And as I'll highlight later, WIPO takes a very broad view of the definition of innovation. And as I mentioned, we want to provide a meaningful tool for action to improve innovation performance by identifying strengths and weaknesses. Now, the index is basically made up of two sub-indices. The first is the input. So these are all the things that funnel innovation in. So things that make innovation possible. So you can see there, our pillars are institutions, human capital and research, infrastructure, market sophistication, and business sophistication. And on the flip side, we have the innovation output sub-index. These are what is the output that comes from a particular country. And we measure output through knowledge and technology outputs, and then creative outputs. And I'll go into these a little bit further. But you can see there the pillars and some of these subsets that go into, say, human capital and research up there. We look at education, that's primary and secondary. We look at tertiary education, and then R&D criteria. And this is what it looks like. So we look at 131 different economies, countries, and we assess the innovation capacity based on 81 different criteria. And you can see here, these are some of the criteria used for Indonesia. So let's break it down. If you look at the top bit, Indonesia has a GII 2021 rank of 87. This is made up of the output of 84 input 87. Indonesia's income group is upper middle. So we do a lot of comparison of income groups because it's not always, it's not correct really to compare different countries that are at different levels of development. So it may not be fair to really compare the innovation output and input of a country, developed country in Europe compared to a country in least developed country, say in Africa, for example. So you can see here the pillars, as I mentioned. So for example, human capital and research made up of education. Within education, there are 5 points of measurement. So for example, expenditure on education as a percentage of GDP. So in this case, Indonesia is ranked 82nd of the 131 countries that we measure in this particular criteria. So it highlights strengths and weaknesses. So the clear white dot is a weakness. So for example, that one I mentioned, government funding per pupil in the secondary system as a percentage of GDP, that is identified as a weakness of Indonesia because it's ranked 90th. The white diamond is a weakness in their particular income group. So amongst other upper middle income countries, education is a weakness for Indonesia. Then we look at strengths. So, for example, I was very pleased to hear Dr. Suamadi mention collaboration, because in Indonesia, if we look at business sophistication, innovation linkages, university, this is 5.2.1, university industry R&D collaboration, Indonesia is ranked 27th out of 131 countries. So that's a strength and a sign that there is university industry R&D collaboration. Now, I should highlight, WIPO does not collect or does not create a lot of these data metrics. We take them from lots of different sources, about a variety of data sources. So some are from the World Bank or from UNESCO or from the International Monetary Fund. So we take data from lots of different sources. So straight away, I think you can see the richness of the data and the depth that you can go into, not just for governments, but also for universities, academics doing research, business people who may want to look at Indonesia as for example, a place where to set up and do business. And they might look at the number of graduates in science and engineering, for example, 2.2.2, to see really, are there going to be enough skilled people for me to set up a lab or a research facility or an operation. So again, what this highlights is the very broad definition of innovation. Let's move on. So I highlighted here human capital and research because this is primarily for universities. And there are a number of areas that are highlighted as weaknesses for Indonesia. So if Indonesia wished to improve their innovation capacity, this could be one way of doing so. The government could look at this and say, okay, well, tertiary inbound mobility, that's a measure of how many people from overseas are coming to study in your tertiary system. And this is often used as a metric of how well regarded, how attractive your universities are. So Indonesia is not ranking all that highly there. However, it seems to not complement this finding for 2.3.4, which is QS university ranking. It's where we take the top 3 universities in the top 1,000 universities in the world based on the QS university ranking and provide an average. So Indonesia ranks very highly there, 34. So the institutions, the 3 anyway, in the top 3 ranked in the QS rankings are doing very well. So what that maybe indicates is perhaps Indonesia is not doing could do more in promoting its excellence in the academic sector. This is just a very informal analysis and observation of some of these data points. Now, if we look at Indonesia over the past 3 GIIs, it's quite stable with some fluctuations here and there, but 85 rank overall in 2019, 85 rank in 2020, and then just dropping 2 places in 2021. In the upper middle income group, Indonesia ranks 27th amongst economies in Southeast Asia, East Asia and Oceania, 14th amongst 17 economies. And these are the strengths and weaknesses that the GII highlighted. So again, for academics, for government, for people wanting to really get an understanding of the innovation state of play in Indonesia, this is really quite a useful data set. I won't go through all these, but you can see again, so many different filters, so many data sets, like the cost of redundancy. How much does it cost to make someone redundant in Indonesia? And it's quite very high rank, meaning it costs a lot, because the theory is if you want to be innovative, but you have a resource, a person who is not performing very well, in some economies, to be able to make them redundant and have that at minimal cost means you're more agile. So you can get another person in who may be more productive, more innovative. Oops, sorry. So lots of different metrics there. I won't go into them all, but I will leave you the URL for the Global Innovation, and if you wish to explore it, you can afterwards. Let's now turn to our other co-host, the Philippines, ranked 51 in the 2021 Global Innovation Index. Sorry, the slide is not quite displaying properly. Just fix that up a little bit. So you can see the output is 40 and the input rank is 72. So what that tells me is the Philippines is quite effective in translating or converting their innovation input into innovation output. So there's the fact that output is 40 and input is 72 means that in the Philippines, there's a lot of innovation based on the input. The Philippines is put in the lower middle income group. And if we look there, it's exactly the same data sets, but very different strengths and weaknesses. So let's look at 2.2.2. Philippines has quite a high percentage of graduates in science and engineering. In fact, it's as a percentage, it's ranked 19th out of all of the economies that we study. Now, where we don't have a data set, you'll see the NA, so tertiary inbound mobility in the Philippines. We didn't have the data set, so we can't assess that criteria. From my perspective, I always thought of the Philippines as quite a creative place, and that is in a way borne out in some of the creative output data. So strengths in its income group, lower middle, aspects to global brand value, ICTs and organizational model creation. But the biggest strength ranked in the top 10 is creative goods export as a percentage of total trade. So the Philippines is doing really well in finding export markets and finding a way to export their creativity as a percentage of total trade. But again, you can see the very broad definition of innovation that WIPO is using. So we look at Wikipedia edits, for example. how many per million of population in the age group of 15 to 69. We look at how many mobile apps have been created per as a percentage of purchasing power parity, GDP, 67. The Philippines, again, has been one of the improvers over time. It has improved 3 spaces since 2019 and is ranking very highly amongst its 34 lower middle income group economies and ranks 11th overall amongst the 17 economies in the region. Snapshot of strengths and weaknesses. Really interesting to see, in some cases, the Philippines is ranked #1 in the world for, say, high technology imports as its percentage of total trade. So a lot of high tech is coming into the Philippines. Why is that a metric within innovation measurement? It's because if there's high technology inputs coming in, then people can use this technology to innovate themselves. So that's the logic there. On the weakness side, like Indonesia, again, a high cost of redundancy dismissal, ranked 114th. Ease of starting a business also could do with improvement. So that means that there may be a lot of red tape, a lot of barriers to starting a business. And that can stifle innovation. If someone has a good idea, but it's too hard to start that business, not good for innovation. The PISA scales in reading, maths and science, globally recognized measurement, 78. That's a weakness for the Philippines. Same with ease of getting credit. Not so easy to get credit, and credit's not so available in the Philippines. So if you want to innovate, you may have to get credit. You may have to seek finance from different sources. That could be a weakness in the Philippines market. I put this slide in here to give you an idea how different ASEAN economies are tracking over time, because the organisers did make me aware we'll have people in the audience from different ASEAN countries, so you can see how your country is tracking. As I mentioned, overall, most ASEAN countries are quite stable, or there's been improvement since 2015. So Indonesia has risen 10 spots since 2015. Philippines has risen dramatically in the ranking. Vietnam also improved their ranking. Thailand's improved the ranking. Singapore, Malaysia, fairly stable. And Cambodia and Laos, still quite new for new in the index, so we don't have a lot of data over time. But what this shows is in the region, in the larger economies, Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, there is innovation taking place. There is a commitment to improving innovation. And there is actual tangible outcomes and effort and improvement in innovation ecosystems in all these countries, because it's not easy to improve your ranking. Because as you saw, there's so many different rankings. So you can't just say, okay, let's try and increase the number of graduates in science and technology and how many people are editing Wikipedia. That won't result in a massive jump. But that's why it takes so many criteria, that it's almost impossible to do just fix one or two things and enhance your ranking. You must take a holistic approach to innovation in the region. And be mindful that every country in the world is also trying to improve their innovation standing. They want to ensure that the innovation ecosystem produces innovation. They want to get bang for their buck. They want to make sure innovation is coming out of that pipeline. So to improve significantly, like Indonesia improved 10 spots, Philippines has improved 32, Vietnam improving 8, Thailand 12. That takes a lot of commitment, a lot of government initiatives, a lot of university effort, a lot of private sector effort in innovation. So As someone who works in innovation, I've been based in ASEAN for nearly 10 years now. It's very pleasing and it's very positive to see many of the large economies embracing innovation and really performing well, and there is improvement in the region. But let's look at COVID. How will that affect R&D? How will it affect innovation? Well, the jury is still slightly out. This plots R&D expenditure on a global perspective. So you can see normally R&D expenditure does pretty closely follow the global GDP growth curve or growth data. So you can see in 2002, when the dot-com crisis of 2001 hit, the R&D expenditure dropped. And that probably bucked the trend there, that GDP didn't really suffer in 2002, however, R&D growth did. But you can see it bounced back really quite strongly in 2005 and 2006, hitting nearly an 8% growth rate. So after the uncertainty of 2002, business R&D still didn't get into negative growth, but dropped significantly. It bounced back pretty strong, pretty impressively. Then we got to the subprime crisis of 2008-09, the global financial crisis. Again, global GDP plummeted and into the negative, less than a negative 2% growth. Business R&Ds dropped and total R&D also dropped, virtually mirroring the GDP of the world. When the world GDP increased, as did total R&D expenditure and business R&D expenditure. Annual fluctuations, but before COVID hit, total R&D expenditure worldwide was almost at an all-time high in the last 20 years. But you can see massive drop in 2020 GDP. It will be fascinating to see if total R&D expenditure follows that curve. The expectation of my colleagues who are economists is that there will be a downward turn. How deep that downward dip is remains to be seen. This perhaps indicates that maybe the global dip won't be as deep as the GDP dip. This tracks patent applications worldwide. So you can see really just a dip in 2019 of 3%. So, and a dip at the end of the global financial crisis of 2009. Interestingly, in 2020, patent filings rose. So patent filings are a reasonable indicator of innovation output, but often it's an investment in R&D maybe 2 years prior, 3 years prior, because when you get to a patent, the point of filing a patent, it is the end result of many years of R&D, as I'm sure many of you would know. It's the end of a lot of research. It's the end of investment in the research. So the patent filing may have been the result of efforts in the previous 3 years. So that's the other thing to note. If you're looking at patent filing as an indicator of innovation, there is definitely a lag between expenditure on R&D and patent filings. I thought this was interesting in 2020. The percentage of companies in different sectors who had reported an R&D expenditure increase. So you can see 80%, nearly 80% of businesses worldwide who are in the software and ICT services sector increased their R&D expenditure. So I thought this was surprising when I saw this data, that pharmaceutical and biotechnology wasn't higher. I thought, given the pandemic, that pharma and biotech may enhance their R&D expenditure to a greater extent. Still, more than half the number of companies in that sector increased their R&D expenditure in 2020. but it was a smaller percentage than ICT hardware, software, and interestingly, construction and industrial metals. Automobiles was perhaps the sector that, of the ones chosen, had the lowest percentage of growth. Venture capital also important. Interestingly, VC deals by region. You can see in the world, there was a sharp take-up in 2021, largely driven by growth in Asia Pacific. A lot of venture capital flowing into China, Japan, Republic of Korea. And WIPO puts out a list of PCT applicants. Now, the PCT is the international patent system. So a number of applications coming from various countries through WIPO, where they want protection in a range of countries outside their jurisdiction. And I included this because we have 2 universities as organisers. You can see there it's a very heavily dominated list by China and the US. So the US, University of California actually filed the most number of PCT applications in 2020. So these are the institutions where they've got a patent or they've filed a patent, and then within 12 months, they're seeking global international protection in different markets for that patent. So UC, University of California, in 2020, filed 559 PCT applications. Let's hope one day we will see Neust and UTP in that list, all going well. This again just goes back to the GII, showing some of the big movers in the region. So China is really enhancing its innovative capacity and both input and output. As you saw, Vietnam firmly in the top 10. India has made great strides. Philippines just sitting outside the top 10, and Indonesia also improved. Also in the publication, we look at how an economy is performing on innovation relative to development. So is it performing above its development capacity, development status? Is it below? So you can see there, a lot of ASEAN countries are above. Indonesia is right on the line, so saying it is performing in an innovation capacity that is in line with its state of development. Philippines is performing above what you would expect as at its level of development. And pleasingly, there's some other ASEAN countries also performing above: Vietnam, Thailand, Singapore, Malaysia. And again, we can look at different innovation performance at different income levels. I sort of touched on that. So for its income level, Thailand's performing above expectations. Malaysia in line with expectations based on its income level. If we look here for the lower middle income group, Vietnam, Philippines, above expectations. Cambodia in line with expectations. Laos, Myanmar, not so much. This was the top 25 of the rankings. So what you can see there, I think it's interesting that a number of the top 10 countries are small in land. When small in land, you don't have, perhaps the mineral deposits to mine. You don't have the agricultural power to produce a lot of food. So when you look at, say, Switzerland, the Netherlands, Singapore, Denmark, even down to 14, Hong Kong, China, very small land areas. So they've decided that their greatest asset is their people, people can be innovative, so they've invested in their people. Israel, another example of that. With that, I think my time is up. I again thank the organisers for their kind invitation. And if you're interested in finding more about the Global Innovation Index, seeing what some of those measurements, what some of those criteria, how we get the data, what it actually measures, what it means, please do visit the globalinnovationindex.org. And with that, I end my presentation and hand it back to our moderator. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Wilmot, for introducing the World Intellectual Property Office, or WIPO, and giving us an insight in our standing in Global Innovation Index. Okay, before we move to the next presenter, allow me to award and read the certificate of appreciation to Dr. Wilmot. Please share the certificate to read the citation. Okay, while waiting for the certificate, if you have queries or questions to Mr. Wilmot, this is the time to hear your voice or to clarify something about WIPO and Global Innovation Index. Yes, Mafasa is raising hand.
Yes, may I?
Yes, yes.
Good morning, Dr. Wilmot. My name is Mafaza. I'm from the Indonesian National Research and Innovation Agency. Actually, what I'm about to ask is a bit non-mainstream. So the United Nations on Thursday launched a campaign against gender-based violence on the internet, complete with the symbol of body right, which can be added to social media posts. And it seeks to highlight the corporate logos and copyrighted intellectual property often receive greater protection online than the people. And the UNFPA's body right campaign also said that women, young people, ethnic minorities, and the community had to be protected against online violence. What do you think about this campaign? And do you think that this campaign might bring some insights to what defines IP or innovation in WIPO, especially like in the decision making, as well as in Indonesia and the Philippines? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Yes, you're right. It's not a mainstream question. I must say I was not aware of the launch of that campaign. It was done by a different part of the UN. What I will say is that WIPO takes a very proactive approach to its gender equality. In fact, for the first time, WIPO's executive has an equal number of women and men in leadership capacity. And we have a number of programs that specifically target women and women's contribution to the innovation within the world. And we are working constantly with organizations and non-government organizations to encourage more women to enter STEM, science, technology, engineering, and maths type of vocations, and to be innovative, because we still feel that women inventors are underrepresented in the patent system. So WIPO is very cognizant of the situation in regards to empowering women to be more innovative. In terms of copyright online and protection of IP online as compared to online violence directed to women, unfortunately, I'm unable to comment on that. It's not in my area of expertise, but I'm sure the UN agency that have launched the program will do their best to ensure this important issue is raised amongst member states. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Wilmot, and to our participants. And now we have also another question coming from Sir Mel Peralta. You are recognized.
Good morning, sir. You discussed or you mentioned already the Philippine rankings with regards to innovation, but is there any rank of the Philippines with regards to inventions approved or registered to the Patent Cooperation Treaty or in the WIPO? Is there a rank of the Philippines? Meaning, is there a Philippine invention that is already approved by Geneva, Switzerland, WIPO, or Singapore? Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the question. A couple of points there I'd like to just clarify. WIPO does not grant any patent rights. WIPO is simply providing a service whereby a patent application comes. We ensure that it has the right information for our member states to make a decision, and then we forward it to the countries which the applicant has designated where they want protection in. So it is up to each country to make an assessment as to that patent's validity in their country based on their national laws and legislation pertaining to patent eligibility. So you don't obtain a global patent. You will obtain specific patent rights in each country in which you have designated, because every country has the sovereign right to grant or reject a patent application based on their legislation. And each country will have similar legislation, but slightly different, particularly in the fields of certain technologies. So for software, for example, or genetic resources, or biotech content. These are subject matters that some countries will permit patent over and others won't. Now, there is data on how many Filipino applications were received through the PCT. I am just having a quick look now to see if I can pull it up. But it's not a huge number off the top of my head, and it fluctuates year in, year out. But I think it is very much in line with the level of development within the Philippines, but we can always try and encourage more. And what WIPO does, for example, is to encourage, to try and build awareness of the global patent system known as the PCT, so that an inventor, if they do have a patent, they know that if they think there will be a commercial value of that patent overseas, that there's a simple way, a simple process of obtaining protection for that invention outside of the Philippines in their key markets, in their key countries. Because that's what WIPO is trying to do, is ensure that an innovation, an invention, has the ability to be protected outside of a certain country. Thank you.
Okay, President Tresna is also raising his hand. President Tresna.
Yes. Thank you, moderator. Yes, it's very interesting, your presentation about the relation with the recession and the growth of IPR, economic recession and IPR growth. Is there a relationship between the growth of micro, small, and medium enterprises in the pandemic era and growth of IPR, and how the phenomena? Maybe you have a survey of research on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the question, Dr. Sumadi. Unfortunately, I don't believe we have data on number of SMEs that exist in certain countries, because that would be more, I think, at a country level to see, in terms of business registration, has there been increase and decrease? But I can certainly see that would be a really valuable metric, and to overlay that with growth in patent filings, or perhaps more for micro SMEs, more inclined to use the trademark system, and how many of them are registering a trademark for their name, for their logo, for aspects of packaging, perhaps. So a very interesting thought. I think often we do refer to micro and SMEs as the engine room of economic development. So they are so important to an economy because they make up often, more than 95% of entities in the market, more than 95% of people are employed in SMEs. So they are very important. They are very much a big IP producer, but the correlation between number of SMEs started or number of SMEs existing in a particular country during the pandemic, I've not seen that data, but it would be interesting to see. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much to our participants for your participation, and also to Dr. Peter Willimot. We will delay a little bit the awarding of certificate caused by technical problem. Again, thank you very much, Dr. Willimot, for sharing information about our Global Innovation Index. Thank you very much. Now moving on to the next topic. The topic of our second keynote speaker is intellectual property environment in the ASEAN. Our speaker is the current Deputy Director General of the Intellectual Property Office of the Philippines. His area of responsibility is legal, policy, and international relations, where he spearheads the initiatives for office automation and process reengineering. Also, innovation and technology transfer support through better access to patent information in universities, and also building delivery platforms to recognize and protect traditional knowledge, traditional culture expressions, and geographic indications. He is an architect by training, having completed his BS Architecture from the University of San Carlos in Cebu, and topping the government national licensure examination in 1986. And also practicing lawyer with an LLB from University of the Philippines, Diliman, Manila. He ranked number 6 in Philippine Bar Examination in 1993 and proceeded to specialize in intellectual property law and alternative dispute resolution, or ADR, through continuous legal training, practice, and consulting work. He is also professor of the Philippine Judicial Academy of the Supreme Court of the Philippines and taught in the College of Law of the University of San Carlos. He co-authored the book on trademark entitled Protecting Marks of Ownership. Ladies and gentlemen, the Director of Division for Asia and Pacific of WIPO, Mr. Andrew Michael Ong.
Sebentar, saya. Oh, di WA.
Okay, while waiting for Mr. Ong, participants may send their concerns or queries through our chat box so that our speakers for today will read it and maybe answer it in the open forum later before we end our program. Okay, Some changes in the program. Let's skip the message from Mr. Ong. Let's move to the next presenter. So at this time, we will now start the series of lectures to be presented by our speakers. The title of our lecture 1 is Intellectual Property Environment in Indonesia. Our speaker is now managing intellectual property to obtain protection along with efforts to foster awareness and researchers to increase IPR productivity and transfer of technology resulting from R&D. He obtained his bachelor degree from Universitas Padjadjaran and master degree from University of Sydney. The director of IP Management of LIPI or LIPI, Mr. Ragil Yoda Egi.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. So let me share my presentation here. Is it clear? Okay. The topic that I would like to present is the intellectual property system and environment in Indonesia. Of course, the system and environment is based on our experience as an R&D institution owned by the government. And I'd like to highlight the laws and regulation, IP management, IP commercialization, and also some of IP management cooperation that we are dealing with today. I'd like to introduce our institution, our new institution. This is established in 2021. BRIN, or abbreviation of National Research and Innovation Agency, is the integration of the 5 R&D institutions owned by the Indonesian government. They are Indonesian Institute of Sciences, and then National Institute of Aviation and Aerospace, Technology Assessment and Purchasing Agency, and National Agency of Nuclear Power. So they are integrated in one single agency, which is called National Research and Innovation Agency. Yeah, with regard to the IP management in the context of the government R&D, at least there are it is subjected to 4 laws and regulations, namely the IP laws. We have 7 IP laws, and then law number 11, year 2019, regarding National System of Science and Technology. And also, there are some government regulations, such as government regulation number 20, year 2005, regarding technology transfer, and 2 ministerial regulations regarding state-owned properties management, and also regarding the royalty payment to public inventor, creator, and breeder. So this is the regulation that we need to follow. All right. This is based on the Article 21 of the Law number 11/2019. It is mandated that the result of research and development shall be published or disseminated by personnel or institution of science and technology, except they are stated otherwise. So it is our obligation that research should be disseminated or open to public. So this is the mandatory, of course, that because the research activities are funded by public, so we need to get feedback to the public also. This is some statement. You know that the choice is publish or perish. If we see that research output, at least there are 3 kinds of outputs. That is scientific, what do you call it? Scientific publication and IP potential outputs, such as work, design, and invention, and also prototype, concept, and some models. This is the output of the research. And what is the mandatory obligation under the law number 11 year 2019, at least there are 4 obligations. That is, we need to manage intellectual property resulted by the R&D institution. And then also the issue of the government ownership, because the government has invested some funding in the research activity. So the ownership issue is prominent in this article. And royalty for the inventor, the right of the inventors of the royalty get from the licensing of the intellectual property is also the obligation of the laws. And also IP sharing ownership. Sometimes the intellectual property derived from the cooperation between the institution, both of internal collaboration or international collaboration. This is our organization structure, and our directorate is under the Deputy of Research and Innovation Facilitation. If we see that the mainstream of the intellectual property centers, at least there are 3 kinds of service. The first is IP protection, IP valuation, and IP commercialization. And our directorate is something mimicking the international trends. We have IP protection, IP valuation, and IP fostering. Because the IP commercialization is handled by another directorate, so we replace the IP commercialization with the IP fostering. With regard to the type of the intellectual property managed by our directorate, we manage also 4 types of intellectual property. That is plant variety protection, industrial design, copyright, and patents. This is the type of the intellectual property that we manage, because that is the output, typically the output of the research. And this is the profile of our intellectual property. We have approximately 1,935 inventions, and some of them are granted, and some of them also are successfully commercialized. And 222 copyrights, 80 industrial design, and 15 plant variety protection. And there is also a question: why you are a government R&D? Why should you have IP? Yeah, because the fact that the knowledge are inherent in the mind of the researcher. So we need to know what is in your mind. We do not want to receive that the knowledge is only in your mind, because you get public funded. Research activity is publicly funded. So we need to get feedback. The government needs the feedback from the research activity. That's why the issue is, how is government get ownership of such invention resulted by the research, and also how can public get access to the knowledge produced by the researcher or the scientist. That's why we need the system, we need the platform that can capitalize or that can capture the knowledge, so we can use the knowledge for the further utilization or the prosperity of the people. With regard to the patent and the relation between patent and dissemination, as you know that the patent is actually patere in Latin language, which means open. So if you have an invention and you need to get it protected, you have to disclose the invention in specific document. And then you can go to the government, and the government will put the document and publish the document, so the people will know the invention you produce. And because you have published your invention, that's why the government will give you an exclusive right upon the invention. And for us, this is the kind, or the alternative publication rather than international scientific journal or other scientific publication. So patent is one channel of the publication that we can go to for public information. As we know that in our perspective, patent is like a love triangle between the inventor, state, and the public. Inventor want to get their invention protected, and they go to the government for the filing application of the patent, and then the state will grant exclusive right. But at the same time, the government will publish the invention so the public understand and know what the inventor claim, what the inventor want to be protected. And at the same time also, public will understand that they will not infringe the invention of the inventor. If they want to apply so, they have to make a right, or they have to get the permission from the inventor. And the inventor is based on his, it is his own, so he can retain or giving the permission to the people who wants to get access or implement the inventor. Thus, this is like a love triangle, something like that. So why public R&D should file the patent? Because if we compare the incentive between inventor and public, inventor get monopoly and law enforcement, but public get more incentive from the patent. That is patent information, that we can explore more technology from the patent information, and also from the information we can develop scientific new technology, and also for the public we can use the patent as freedom to operate. Freedom to operate. What is the difference between private and public intellectual property? Based on our regulation, private intellectual property can only be transferred by inheritance, by grant, by probate, written agreement, and other types of transfer allowed by the laws. But public intellectual property which is a little bit strict to transfer. It can also be transferred by license, cooperation, scientific services, public, and the provision is not through sale is allowed, because it is owned by the government, so we cannot do the true sale for the invention owned by the government. And the technology transfer, I would like to tell you the definition of the technology transfer under the government regulation number 20/2005, and the regulation defines the technology transfer as transfers of the ability of utilize and master of science and technology between institution, agency, people, both located within the territory or outside the territory, and the technology can also coming from outside into the country, or from the country to another country. That is the definition from the regulation. And if you see here that the tendency of the technology transfer is not on the technology, but the tendency is the improvement of the ability of the people to master the technology. So the tendency is in human resource development, in human resource improvement, in human resource mastery of the technology. This is mandated by the regulation, government regulation number 20. What is the scheme of the public technology transfer? We have two kinds of the technology transfer. The first is commercial purpose. By the way, this commercial purpose only be conducted by licensing with royalty payment and the royalty provision for the inventor, and also as I have mentioned before, no true sale is allowed under the government regulation. And for non-commercial use, which means that people can use the intellectual property owned by the government by free, and there is no economic benefit, or there is no royalty to be charged to the people. And some ways of the non-commercial grant is by dissemination to the local government and also regional special program, grant for SMS and other related programs. This is one example of the technology transfer. We have an invention in 2020. This device is like what do we call it? Like a ventilator for the patient of COVID-19 disease. And they were cooperation. They invented this invention by cooperation with some of the vendor, and the vendor commercialized this invention to the public. We have some cooperation also to the hospital. For example, this is the hospital in Bandung that they working together at the first time at the beginning of the research until the trying out of the technology. This is still in Bahasa, but I think you can capture the message of this video. So this is the vendor who will capture the invention. And this is the other scheme of the technology transfer, which use the non-commercial scheme. As you know that Indonesian farmers' dependency to chemical fertilizer is very high, and also the price of the fertilizer is very expensive. It's very high also. But if we get to this technology, we have to be aware that the market niche is very narrow. So we need to choose the scheme of the technology transfer. That's why we choose the non-commercial license. And what we are doing is train the farmers produce this biofertilizer. So some farmers need to combine the fertilizer between chemical and biofertilizer. So we train them to have ability to produce themselves. So it will reduce their cost of the farming activity. It is the brand of the organic fertilizer, Bionic or Starmic, and we developed the what do you call it, the starter of this fertilizer. This is the source of the microorganism, because the fertilizer comes from a certain microorganism, and when we get the microorganism, we deposit the microorganism to this institution. We call it Indonesian culture collection. So many microorganisms are collected there, and in that culture collection, there are some research and cultivation activity, and we also open collaboration for scientific or industrial purpose. What about the royalty for the inventor, creator, or the designer? According to ministerial regulation numbers 136/2021, the creator, inventors, and breeders has a portion of royalty sharing. If the license get up to 1 billion rupiah, the inventor, the creator, the breeders will get 30% of the license. And if the license value is more than 1 billion rupiah, the creator, inventors, breeder, and the inventors will get 20% of the royalty get from the license. So this is the provision under this regulation. The IP Management Strategic Alliance, we create some platform for strategic alliance. We call it is the IP Intellectual Property Portal, Intellectual Property Management Portal. It is an electronic platform for IP management and databases. And it is also open access platform for public or for other IP management center or for other R&D and public research institution. We can share this platform for free. And also because they get into this alliance, we provide some service for our partners, namely the IP management training and coaching, and also some other service for improving or for synchronizing the management system. So this alliance is very strategic for the IP management program. The inspiration of the IP Management Alliance is, if you see that in the airline business, some of the airline get into join the strategic alliance like a SkyTeam and also Star Alliance and some other international alliance. So why do they do this? Because they want to improve or they want to have similar management system. And by joining this SkyTeam or this alliance, they will get improve their service, they will get improve their management, so they will improve the product and improve everything that they need to get complete with other aligners. So this is the inspiration of the IP management system. So we provide cooperation sharing like knowledge sharing and IP management improvement, sharing for other things that we need to improve our management, developing and synchronizing IP management standard and promoting IP productivity and dissemination. So basically we need to improve our service quality. This example of the activity of the IP management system. We provide coaching, patent drafting and filing and other training program that is needed by the IP management or IP centers. Regard to the partners, we have some partners in joining the IP port management system. We have several IP centers from some universities and some other R&D institutions. So they are joining us, and it is projected that in the future the member will be increased, and we will improve also the system because there is so many things that we need to accommodate because of the need of the recent development. Thank you very much. Salamat po, and I will be very happy if we can discuss and there is some issue or feedback that we can deal with together. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ragil, for sharing the views of Indonesia in intellectual property and also showing to us the tangible products of Indonesia. Okay, let's proceed now. If our participants have questions or clarifications to Gil, you may use our chat box here in our Zoom. To introduce our lecture 2 speaker. So our program or our lecture speaker, second lecture speaker is a program manager and oversees the operation of the nationwide network of the Innovation and Technology Support Office, or ITSO, a flagship program of the Intellectual Property Office of the Philippines. He finished the course Intellectual Property Management in Tokyo, Japan, through a grant from the Japan Patent Office. He co-wrote the Manual on Property Valuation financed by the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, or APEC, to be used as reference material for certain APEC economies on the basic principles and techniques of technology valuation. His topic is the IP environment of the Philippines. Program Head of Intellectual Property of the Philippines, Mr. Adrian Sablan.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, good morning, good afternoon to all who are here from Indonesia, our friends from Indonesia and from the Philippines, and to Mr. Peter. Good day to all of you. Thank you for inviting me to speak here. Once again, my respect to President Jacoba and to President Tresna of UTP Indonesia. Let me now begin my presentation for this session. Do you now see my slides? Okay.
Yes, sir.
So in the case, I will be talking about some of our advances on the IP ecosystem and innovation front in the Philippines. Okay, and later on, I will be talking about our ITSO also and what we have done so far. Okay, so the onslaught of the COVID-19 pandemic had dramatically disrupted the growth momentum of the intellectual property environment of the whole world. Really, from the effects of the pandemic, even the legal infrastructures put in place by the Philippine government, which enable the growth and development of the national ecosystem. Simply put, despite COVID, we cannot be prevented from advancing.
Okay, we're having a technical difficulties for Mr. Adrian. Are you there, Sir Adrian?
Yes, hello. Yeah, I will have.
Okay, welcome back.
Yeah, I will have to continue. As I was saying, no, reeling like its neighbors. Can I be heard now?
Yes, sir, clear.
The Philippines strives to weather the challenges spawned by COVID-19, leaning on the various legal IP infrastructures put in place by the Philippine government, which enable the growth and development of the national IP ecosystem. So we're forging on despite COVID-19. No? So here, let me talk about the legal infrastructures, the Philippine policy environment, and the legal infrastructures that nurture Philippine innovation. We have several laws in the Philippines that support our pursuit of innovation. One is Republic Act 8293, of course, the intellectual property law of the Philippines. Second, we have Republic Act 10055, or technology transfer law. And then we have Republic Act 11293, the Innovation Act of the Philippines, and Republic Act 11337, the Innovative Startup Act. And we also have Republic Act 11057, the Personal Property Security Act, and Republic Act 8439, Magna Carta for Scientists and S&T workers. I'll be talking about each of these briefly, no? So as was mentioned by the opening message earlier, in the opening message earlier with President Jacoba, indeed, the RA 8293, or the Intellectual Property Law of the Philippines, has wrote its state publication thus. The state recognizes that an effective intellectual and industrial property system is vital to the development of domestic and creative activity, facilitates technology transfer, attracts foreign investments, and ensures market access for our products. And the use of intellectual property bears a social function. To this end, the state shall promote the diffusion of knowledge and information for the promotion of national development and progress of the common good. It is also the policy of the state to streamline administrative procedures of registering patents, trademarks, and copyright, to liberalize the registration on the transfer of technology. So, what about Republic Act 10055? This law enunciates, this is one of our most beautiful laws enacted, no? Protection and commercialization of creative and innovative outputs generated at the level of academic and research organizations. What are the salient features of this law which support innovation in the Philippines? One, provisions which allow research and development institutes, including state universities, to own and manage the IP assets generated through funds from a government financial institution. In comparison, no, I learned from the presentation of Director Yoga earlier, no, that in Indonesia, they are not allowed to commercialize the technologies, no, generated by government institutions. Conversely, in the Philippines, we are allowed. In fact, we are not only allowed, but state universities and colleges, or especially government research and development institutions, are not only allowed, but in fact obliged government financial agencies. Okay, so provision to own and manage the IP. Provisions also which allow both RDIs and employees to enjoy a share from the revenue cash flows from commercialized IP assets. This is one of the beautiful features of the law, meaning the inventors themselves, when the inventions got commercialized, they can actually get a share from the revenue pie, no, that is allowed by law. And we can maybe consider that as one of our best practices, no? So we have another law, Republic Act 11293, the Philippine Innovation Act, no, which aims to generate and scale up action in all levels in areas of education, training, research, and development towards promoting innovation and internationalization activities of MSMEs, which is the largest sector, business sector in the Philippines, about 98% to 99%, no? As a driver of sustainable and inclusive growth, no? We have another, Republic Act 11337, the Innovative Startup Act, no, which envisions to have 1,000 startups in the Philippines. The startup sector is a budding sector in the country, no? This act provides for benefits and programs to strengthen and promote the Philippine startup ecosystem. Specifically, no, it will provide support for full or partial subsidy for the registration and cost in the application and processing of permits and certificates required for the business registration and operation of an enterprise with appropriate local or national government agencies. Another is endorsement to the Intellectual Property Office of the Philippines, our office, for appropriate assistance and expedited intellectual property registration and protection consistent with the law and existing rules and regulations. So endorsement to the Department of Foreign Affairs for the expedited processing of appropriate travel visas. That is exciting. And number 4, full or partial subsidy for the use of facilities, office space, equipment, and or services provided by government or private enterprises or institutions. We also have the Personal Property Security Act, which is a new law enacted in 2018. This law provides for enforcement of security interests in personal property, no, both tangible and intangible. It supports the MSME in particular in sourcing funds from financial institutions using intangible assets. So we can now use, say, patent as a security instrument if we want to secure financial assistance, say, from banks or financial institutions. Okay, there. And then we have the Philippine Creative Industries Act. No, the creative industries are a vital sector which make up about 7.34% of the Philippines' gross domestic product. So our legislature is currently working on the enactment of the Philippine Creative Industries Act, which will outline support for 9 specific sectors. No, we have the audio and audiovisual media, digital interactive media, books, publishing and printed media, creative services, design, visual arts, performing arts, traditional cultural expressions, and cultural sites. And the Philippine Creative Industries Act intends to put in place support systems such as, number 1, infrastructure support for the development of creative zones, also tax incentives and reduced custom duties, support for the digitalization of creative industries, support for creative education and technical training, a creative industries trust fund, and access to low-cost financing or IP-backed financing to support creative startups. No? So we also have one beautiful law, the RA 8439, or the Magna Carta for scientists, engineers, researchers, and other science and technology workers, but only for the government. No? This law incentivizes qualified S&T workers in Philippine government by providing them with monetary benefits such as longevity pay on a monthly basis, no, on a monthly basis, which is added to their regular monthly compensation, including hazard pay also on a monthly basis, and subsistence allowance, this one on a daily basis, added to the compensation package of a government employee. Isn't that beautiful? It is. Another, I will talk about the Philippine Global Innovation Index. This was already mentioned by Peter earlier, no? So in the GII 2021, the Philippines ranked 51st, no, among 132 economies. Okay, the Philippines innovation output, however, went up from 40 to 41, although we were higher in 2020. No, in 2020, actually, the Philippines leapfrogged to rank 50th, no, among 131 economies, a 50-notch spike in only a matter of 6 years from rank 100 in 2014. So I mean, dipping by one notch lower, we attribute that to the COVID-19 pandemic in the Philippines. So somehow there is really an effect, no, brought about by this pandemic. So there, comparatively, however, in 2019, the Philippines already made impressive advances, no? It was in 2019 when the Philippines slipped into the league, the very first time, into the league of 42% innovative economies from 60% of the top economies in the previous 4 years, which is relatively a significant pool indeed, no? And it was also in 2019 when the Philippines, for the very first time in history, broke into the cluster of innovation achievers, economies that scored high across innovation dimensions relative to the gross domestic product of the country. Okay, so that's something to cheer up. I mean, to cheer us up on. And in terms of our GII pillars in 2020, no, we actually performed above average in terms of business sophistication and knowledge and technology outputs, no? So we are actually doing progressively better, no? As it shows year after year, progressively better. We are not yet there, no? If our benchmark, for example, is Singapore, we are not yet there, far from there, but we are going there, no? We are making impressive advances already somehow, no? And as was mentioned earlier by Peter, no? The Philippines is quite, if I may quote him, the Philippines is quite effective in converting output into innovation, no? And we are above expectations in innovation performance. So thank you indeed, because it is also because due to our collective efforts, no, we, you and I, and we in the Intellectual Property Office, including other government agencies, we comprise the Philippine innovation ecosystem, and all of these are due to our working together, our collective work, no, as innovation actors in the Philippine innovation ecosystem. And in terms of our creative outputs, again in 2020, no, in the GII 2020, no, of course, the assessment was done in 2019 before the pandemic. The creative outputs pillar climbed 6 steps to 57th from 63rd in prior year in 2019. And this was driven mostly by the creative goods and services category, which rose to 18th spot from 40th in prior year. No? These numbers, no, collectively may attest to the amplified creativity in the Philippines, as copyright recordation in 2019 rose to 33% year on year to 1,682. No, impressive statistics, relatively speaking, of course. Okay, so there. And here, our current developments in the Philippine IP ecosystem. And this is one very good news already, of which IPOPHIL, as a national IP office, is really very proud. No? The Philippines has been designated by the World Intellectual Property Organization, Peter is here, as an international searching authority. That's number one. Number two, we're also designated as an international preliminary examination authority. And these recognitions are very material when you apply for international patent via the Patent Cooperation Treaty. Indeed, in 2019, we had 20 applications. In 2020, we had 32 no? PCT applications in 2020. We have yet to track down for 2021, of course. So again, these designations by WIPO, this is very important to facilitate international patent cooperation via the PCT route. No, we are recognized as one of the top performing international patent authorities in terms of completion and transmittal of international search report or ISRs to WIPO, according to WIPO's yearly review 2021. Okay, something to be proud about, no, for the Philippines. And as ISA and IPEA, did you know that the Philippines was able to complete and transmit 100%? 100%, obviously proud, of ISRs requested at IPOPHIL and achieve 100% compliance in the timeliness of transmittal within the prescribed deadline of 9 months from priority date. And the Philippines shares the top spots with Ukraine and the Nordic Patent Institute on ISR completion in Ukraine, Singapore, and Chile on the timeliness of transmittal. So again, we are doing some impressive advances, of course, relative to our neighbors, no? And here, another, look at this, and this is very important development because as we speak, 80%, I mean 81% of the entire ecosystem of state universities and colleges in the Philippines already have an intellectual property policy, which is a very critical instrument, no, to support and advance the pursuit of research in state universities and colleges. In fact, I just emerged last time from the first global peace conference. I spoke there, no, and this is one of the issues that was brought about, and the importance of having an IP policy was underscored. And 81% of our SUCs, the state university sector in the Philippines, already have an IP policy, plus 51 technology transfer protocols already. See, and technology transfer protocol is important to guide the commercialization programs and initiatives of state universities and colleges in the country. Okay, so here another on technology business incubators. We already have 13 existing technology business incubators in the Philippines and 20 higher education institution readiness for innovation and entrepreneurship institutions supported by our Department of Science and Technology. Okay, so we are growing in that respect. And in terms of IP filings, okay, here, as national economies work together to recover from the effects of COVID-19, IP filings in the Philippines posted a 20% increase to 22,919 for the first semester of the 2021 alone, compared to 2020. Again, that's for the first semester of 2021 alone. We have yet to account for the remainder of the year, no? And trademark filings hiked also by 23% from 15,969 filings to 19,649. Resident filings, that means local from the Philippines, now filings made up the bulk of the applications and registered a 39% surge from 8,859 to 12,288. Again, relatively significant. And patent filings, despite the pandemic, spiked by 2% from 1,899 to 1,945. No, although our international patent filings dropped a bit by 1%. Well, again, because of the pandemic. No, copyright deposits saw a significant increase by 163% from 285 to 761. As we say it in the vernacular, partida, pandemic pa yan. Even with the pandemic, we still managed to do it. No? And IPOPhil is really very happy. And congratulations to all actors in the Philippine innovation ecosystem, because together we made this. Again, relatively speaking, compared to our neighbors, no, who are doing better than us, no, in some respects. Here, and this is very important, on IP adjudication, we already have special commercial courts in place to handle specifically, exclusively IP cases. This is a very, very important development, having special commercial courts already in place in the Philippines. Do you know that? Now you know. And our Bureau of Legal Affairs has adopted the online hearings and mediation of cases. In fact, we were the very first government institutions to go fully digital during the pandemic. IPOPhil was one of the very few institutions that went fully digital during the pandemic. And we have the revised rules of procedure for intellectual property rights cases, no, which has been promulgated by the Philippine Supreme Court, with the object of improving and expediting the resolution of IP cases. Isn't that wonderful? It is. Okay, and now let me talk about our TISCs, the Technology Innovation Support Centers, no, our ITSO, the Philippine version of TISCs. This was also mentioned earlier by Peter, no, in his talk. The ITSO is patterned after the TISC of WIPO It is a flagship program of IPOFIL to support creativity and innovation. The network, now numbering 77, when we transition to the ITSO 2.0 or TIS 2.0, is housed in universities and research institutions all over the Philippines. And Nueva Ecija University of Science and Technology is a member of the TIS network in the Philippines. The ITSO has been designated as innovation centers by the Philippine Board of Investments in its 2020 investments priorities plan. Oh, by the way, it's not easy to become a member of the ITSO network because you have to pass certain qualification standards before you can become a member of the TIS network in the Philippines. Okay, so we are now designated as innovation centers or innovation hubs. Now, in terms of expertise, our ITSOs have cultivated expertise in certain disciplines over time. So in terms of entrepreneurship and development, industrial science, design and design arts, food science, food technology, you see the numbers there, information technology, bio and nanotechnology, earth and atmospheric sciences, chemical, mechanical, electrical, mathematical, actuarial, and data science, AI, artificial intelligence, and robotics. We have 13 for that. So we actually have a universe of experts across several disciplines in the Philippines from our TIS network or ITSO network. Okay, and anytime we can tap this, we can tap any of them from the ITSO network. And here, in terms of specific competencies that they were able to build over time, IPOFIL capacitated the ITSO to acquire critical 4IR, Fourth Industrial Revolution aligned skill sets to support the research and innovation agenda and to provide the services according to the WIPO TIS standards. For example, services now provided by our ITSO according to the standards by WIPO. For example, access to patent, scientific, and technical data bases. We have 74 ITSOs providing that particular service. And they are also there. We have 43 are providing to non-residents assistance and advice in using databases. We have 74. Those performing patent analytics or patent landscape report, we have 8. Assistance and advice on IP management and commercialization, we have 41 of them. Assistance and advice on IP management, patent drafting, licensing, and technology transfer, we have 54 from our universe. And assistance and advice on IP management, patent drafting, and prosecution, we have 59 from the TISC universe. Those who are able to do expert in search, novelty, and patentability, we have 68. Those who do search state-of-the-art, we have 52. Those who are able to do search validity, we have 34. And those who are able to do search and freedom to operate search, we have 35. It is very important for us to account what is the expertise line of our TISCs, is so that anytime we can tap this, So it's good to know that we have this kind of expertise that we can tap anytime from our ITSO network client with the WIPO standards. And here, in terms of ITSO competencies, the ITSOs have honed their expertise in patent search and patent drafting. And a number of our ITSO, in fact, are certified patent agents or certified patent attorneys after passing a rigorous examination procedure. It's not really easy to become a certified patent agent in the Philippines. And in terms of levels of proficiency in patent search and patent drafting, those who can say, we can say are able to do, who are experts in doing patent information search, we have 32 from our network. And those who are experts in patent drafting, we have 27 TISCs from our network. Okay? And we know who they are so that we can, as I said, tap them anytime we need them. So we have this reservoir of expertise across layers of skill sets already in the Philippines. through our TISC network. And in terms of IP filings, no, from, you see, of course, we dropped, understandably, our filings dropped dramatically in 2020, no, during really the height of the pandemic. But look, the data would tell us that our progressive marks in terms of patent filings, no, patent filings from local universities are really increasing year after year, no? And look at this, from 2012 to 2019, no? ITSO filings again increasing as against local patent filings from non-ITSO, no? So, and this one, look, in 2019, in terms of our patent filings, we had 35 in 2020 that dropped to 89 only, but by 2021, we're slowly picking up again, no? Albeit slowly. So by October this year, just last month, we already have 147 local patent filings from our TISC network alone. You see that? So beautiful. And here, another on intellectual property curriculum, because this is also very important, no? We want to see our an increasing number of our universities offering intellectual property either as a full-blown course or as an elective, 3-unit elective, no? For example, so a number of higher education institutions are now offering intellectual property either as a course or as a subject. Of the HEIs, higher education institutions or universities, or members of IPOPHIL's national network of TISCs, we have 30.55% already currently offering IP as a course with active enrollees, no? With active enrollees, even in the time of pandemic. And in terms of IP commercialization, no? IP assets that got commercialized successfully in 2020 to 2021, no, bucking the dire effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, 8% of the universities in the TISC network had drafted and filed several, meaning they are the ones who draft their own claims, no? They are the ones who draft the specifications of their patent or the claims of their inventions. Drafted and filed and successfully commercialized the IP assets in 2020, again, in spite of the pandemic. Drafting their patents is one of our requirements in the ITSO 2.0 clustering scheme, no? Because that's one way by which we can measure their competency. If they are already themselves able to draft the specifications, that's also one of our best practices. Here, we introduced the TISC or ITSO 2.0 clustering scheme. What is this? This clustering scheme aims to identify the ITSOs who have developed certain competencies and who have the manpower to provide such. Each ITSO will be recognized according to levels of competency, such as maybe they are bronze for now, silver for now, but will become gold later, and sometime later will become platinum. What are these? And what are the requirements that they have to deliver to become bronze, silver, gold, or platinum? Here, to become bronze, our TISCs should be able to conduct at least 12 IP foundation courses, and not all, and at least 2 patent search training courses, and not or at least 1 patent drafting course either to internal or to external clients. And they have to satisfy this to be recognized as bronze. And we do recognize them. In fact, this year, in the early part of the year, we already recognized a number of universities from our ITSO network. And to become silver, our ITSOs must be able to render and provide at least 24 patent search services, either to internal or external clients. Again, this is one metric by which we can measure the internal competencies of our ITSOs. How competent are they already in terms of certain specific competencies or metrics? And to become gold, our ITSOs must be able to draft and file 6 invention patent applications, either by the institution or for external clients. And the highest, of course, is platinum. And to become platinum, no, each source will at least, they must be able to file at least 7 invention patent applications. And they must be able to commercialize or provide assistance in the successful commercialization of at least one technology, either through licensing or through other modes of commercialization, including the establishment of a startup company or spin-off for the technology as may be applicable. In fact, this year, no, we were able to recognize 4 of our ITSOs. And these are state universities, no, mind you. These are government universities that were recognized by the Intellectual Property Office of the Philippines as platinum awardees for having filed at least 7 invention patents and successfully commercialized their IP assets. That in spite of the pandemic. And IPOFIL here, incentivizing another, and I guess this is also one best practice, no, that we can share with our brethren in Indonesia, no, incentivizing filing of patent, no. In fact, this is one of the issues that were raised during the Global TIS conference a few days ago, 2 days ago, no. So IPOFIL drafted and proposed to the Commission on Higher Education. Our Commission on Higher Education is a government body that supervises state universities and colleges in the Philippines. No? They are also exercising regulatory functions, no? But essentially supervisory and administrative functions. That's the Commission on Higher Education, or CHED, Technical Working Group on the National Budget Circular 461, NBC 461 Circular, which is the faculty position reclassification in the Philippines, no, by the CHED and the Department of Budget and Management, which is another government agency in the Philippines that oversees our budget, no, as a government. We introduced a new point scheme where the highest points will be given for every invention patent file to be credited in favor of the inventor for promotion in faculty rank. And yours truly joined the Commission on Higher Education, PWG, no, with regard to the drafting of the new points system. No, I was invited by CHED. And considerable points will now be earned also by a state university who is able to commercialize its IP asset. And those points that a SUC like Neust will earn, they can use, no, when they are accredited for their accreditation. For example, by ACUP, no, they can use those points to attain level accreditation. Okay, so in November 2021, just this November, the CHED DBM issued, again, DBM is a Department of Budget and Management, no, another government office, so they are in tandem, issued a joint circular for public consultation containing guidelines on the reclassification of faculty positions in state universities and colleges. And the new guidelines, invention patent filed, for every invention patent, it will be allocated the highest points earned cumulatively at APG stages. What is this APG? By applying at the stage of application. No, the inventor or the SUC, the state university and college, will earn 10 points. At the point of publication, 20 points. And at the point of grant of the patent, which in the Philippines takes an average of between 3 and 4 years, 80 points. Automatic, you will get 80 points for that. No? Whereas for utility model application, it will be given one-shot points only of 10 points upon grant. No longer APG, no, only upon grant, 10 points only. So again, for patents, filed 10 at application stage, 20 at publication stage, and grant at 80 at grant stage. And why is this an incentivizing scheme? Because these points can be used by the faculty for promotion. No? If you are, let's say, assistant professor 1 now, if you get certain points, accumulate certain points, you could become full professor in a matter of time, no? After a certain cycle for the NBC 461. That's one way by which we can incentivize our professors, our researchers, innovators, and inventors in the Philippines, no? And this soon might be implemented already. For now, this is for public consultation yet. Not only that, for every commercialized patented products, no, just like as I said, the state universities for last year that were able to commercialize their patents, no, they will also get points in favor of the state university, such as for patents or products commercialized locally, they get 5 points, maximum of 20. For products, patents commercialized internationally, meaning they were able to do cross-border technology transfer, let's say within the ASEAN region, like technology transfer, for example, to Indonesia. I hope I will be able to visit Indonesia again. I love Jakarta. Commercialized internationally, they get 10 points, maximum of 30. Okay? So that's really a scheme, no, that incentivizes the work, both of our researchers and innovators, and the work of the university. So we have separate points for the faculty and separate points for the university. So everybody's happy with this kind of scheme. Okay? Because again, we duly recognize the work of our innovators in the Philippines. And here, apart from that, the Philippines has been a recipient, I have to mention this, of the WIPO Enabling Innovation Environment, or EIE IP and Technology Support Project. So this is under the leadership of Director Andrew Michael Ong, who is the director of the ASPAC Bureau, who spoke earlier. Now, oh, by the way, for your information, did you know that the father of ITSO in the Philippines is Andrew Michael Ong? The ITSO is actually his brainchild. He founded the ITSO in the Philippines before he joined WIPO. No, he was our Deputy Director General in the Philippines before he joined WIPO. Okay, so again, the WIPO Enabling Innovation Environment is focused on developing and institutionalizing the right conditions, structures, and people to facilitate the process of invention capture through IP mechanisms, transfer and transformation of technologies into products, services, and companies that will be available to serve the interests of society. And a component of the EIE project is the WIPO EIE Remote Mentorship Program, which is aimed at assisting a select number of ITSO spokes or TISC spokes in the Philippines with skills and knowledge in the areas of IP management and technology commercialization. The project also aims to further capacitate ITSO spokes, technology transfer managers, in evaluating their patent portfolios for commercialization. This year, we have 6 spokes from our TISC network who were chosen by WIPO as mentees, who are each assigned a mentor by WIPO. So it's a one-to-one correspondence mentorship scheme. No, last year we had, for example, Dr. Richard Cahun as one of our mentors. No, so WIPO really picks the best mentors, no, to be assigned for each country spoke. Okay, so now here, but despite our advances, of course, we still have some challenges to face and to hurdle, no? Despite all of those advances on the innovation front that we have been making collectively as innovation actors in the Philippines, these are the challenges that we have identified, no? One is the need to further institutionalize, because again, IP policy is very, very critical instrument. The development of IP policy among this time private universities, no? Because we have already covered significantly the government sector for SUPs, for state universities. This time around, private universities, including research and development institutions. Private HEIs, universities in the Philippines alone, number almost 2,000. So that's a big ecosystem. Number 2, the need to ramp up mechanisms that will stimulate more vigorous IP commercialization activities, such as tech licensing and establishment of spin-offs. Oh, by the way, we already have a number of our ITSOs who have established spin-offs. In fact, a few of our ITSOs now already are managing successful spin-off companies. No, they are successfully managing their spin-off companies already. Okay? And this would necessitate, however, among others, one, greater and more cohesive academic, government, industry collaborations. And number two, crafting of technology transfer protocols in research and development institutions to inform the pursuit of commercialization of research products. Number three, the need for more inclusive IP-backed financing, although we already have the law, no, the Personal Property Security Act. But we need to introduce more IP-backed financing. And I am happy to inform you that we are now working together with ASEAN and Korea, no, to introduce programs to support, no, our MSMEs through IP-backed financing scheme. No, that project is now in the initial discussions stage, but we are moving in that direction already. Suffice it to say, no. So IP-backed financing infrastructures to support innovation actors such as our MSMEs, our universities, and individual inventors who want to capitalize on intellectual property assets to establish spin-offs or to roll out other commercialization ventures. And number four, need for the institutionalization of the use of the IP management tools such as search report, patent drafting, IP assessment, IP auditing, and IP valuation. No? The Philippines now, through the IPOPhil, is in the works already to establish a pool of IP evaluators. No? We are working also in that direction now to establish a pool of IP evaluators in the Philippines. No? Certified IP evaluators. But this will entail capacitating more staff designated at IP management centers such as the TISCs or the ITSOs to acquire these skill sets. No. Number five, need for the amendment of the IP code of the Philippines, no, as to make it more in tune with and responsive to the needs of the times. Although now our proposed amendments are already being deliberated on at the Philippine House of Representatives, our legislature. In the Philippines, we are a bicameral legislature. We have a Senate and we have a House of Representatives. No? And number six, need for the fostering of a paradigm shift for IP holders and IP practitioners from IP adjudication to IP dispute resolution or amicable settlement or mediation. And number seven, need to conduct comparative study on assessing clarity of intentions with focus on the examination guidelines used in other offices, because there's also a need to harmonize our guidelines, even in the ASEAN, no, in regional guidelines that we are using, even the ASEAN, we need to harmonize that. And we are now moving in that direction as well. Okay, so these are the challenges that we have identified to allow us to further move forward, banking on the advances that we have made collectively thus far as a country. Okay, and I'm finishing now. Here, to further stimulate the innovation environment in the Philippines and to strengthen the role that ITSO plays in providing innovation-related services, IPOPhil has proposed to WIPO definite action agenda. And we are talking already, no? In fact, last year we talked, and 3 days ago during the Global ITS conference, I already mentioned this, no? Number one, professionalizing the services offered by ITSO. If we are going to professionalize those services, for example, patent search, patent drafting, IP evaluation, patent analytics, patent mapping, no, this will help boost the brand equity of TISC or ITSO as an innovation hub. And I'd like to mention that last year, WIPO, together with TISCs in the ASEAN region, has started already exploring this particular initiative. And number two, which we proposed, introduction of a regional competency-based certification scheme for ITSO staff and technology transfer professionals. The certification requirements will be adapted, of course, to the needs and context and the region of the ITSO, like in the Philippines. Staff must pass international competency tests, such as for patent analytics, drafting, IP triaging, IP clinicking, IP evaluation, etc. Because if we will be able to push forward a certification scheme, plus professionalize the services of our ITSO, this will help increase the value premium of ITSO or TISCs, in our case, in the Philippines, of course, and in the ASEAN region, who also have TISCs, for that matter. So there you go. And because I mentioned the several advances that we are making collectively on the innovation front, what works? What works, as far as best practices are concerned? Again, you still have to do a lot better, comparatively speaking, especially if our benchmark in Asia is Singapore. We still have to do a lot better. But again, we are doing something very good already, but we have to do more. So what helps? Number one, it helps that in the Philippines, we already have enabling legal infrastructures that are supportive of the local innovation ecosystems. Those laws that were passed, even the recent new ones, are really helpful, helpful mechanisms to push innovation infrastructures in the Philippines. Okay? And for state universities, of course, the faithful implementation of critical policy instruments such as IP policy and tech trans protocol to guide technology creation and commercialization. Another thing that seems to be working very well for the Philippines is the introduction and establishment of innovative programs that are consumer-centric or end-user specific, meaning our innovations and technical solutions that result from our research respond to the very needs of our consumers or end users, including industries and MSMEs. And the fourth that seems to be working for us are the institutional schemes that incentivize the work of IP creators and innovators. And these schemes also are articulated expressly. These are articulated explicitly in the IP policies of state universities and colleges in the Philippines. How to incentivize the innovators and IP creators. What can they receive? How much they will receive for every patent commercialized? In fact, there are provisions in the IP policy that even if they retire, when they retire, or if they separate from the university, they will still get a share of the revenue pie for as long as it continues to earn revenue streams and for as long as the IP rights to the IP, to the technology still subsist. They will continue to receive. And they are also privileged to elect successor interest or heir, who will continue to receive the revenues on their behalf. So that's it's very, very important to put all of these things in place. And a faithful implementation of all of these schemes in the IP policy is also very, very important. So these things are what we see work for the Philippines, and these are the schemes that are helping us as collective actors to push innovation in the Philippines to a higher level. Okay? And lastly, in sustaining the Philippines' innovation gains, of course, we recognize that we need to do three things. Ramp up even more dramatically the national innovative and creative outputs. Build strong human, intellectual, and relational capital in universities. That's why the professional certification scheme that we are proposing will really help also in that direction. No? Relational capital meaning our partnerships and collaborations that we forge domestically and on the global stage, no? Including interlinking with digital IP portals, no? Interlinking with digital IP portals globally. And number three, build up even more the country's research in innovation culture, because goes without saying, as there are studies already showing the significant positive correlation between research and innovation culture. So the higher the innovation culture, the higher the innovation outputs. So these three things we need to pursue collectively as agencies, as innovation actors in the Philippines. But with the relative advances that we have already been making together, I guess even despite the pandemic, the future looks bright for us and will look even brighter tomorrow. So thank you very much. I hope I was able to share something of value to everyone, even to our friends in Indonesia. Thank you so much. Nueva Ecija University of Science and Technology. Maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat. Terima kasih. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Adrian Sablan, for sharing the achievements of the Philippines in IP production, and of course, sharing the best practices which is implemented and monitored by the intellectual property of the Philippines. Now, we are allowed to entertain at least one question. So this question is from Ma'am Mafasa. Let me read. Thank you both presenters for such interesting and insightful presentations. Convey my question to Dr. Sablan. While maintaining a conducive IP environment for universities, companies, research institutions, and how does the government of the Philippines protect communal property rights in the country?
We are actually the concept of Creative Commons license, no? In fact, we have strengthened our copyright laws in the Philippines, no? By the introduction of RA 10372, which made amendments to RA 8293, the Intellectual Property Code of the Philippines. So the Republic Act 10372 introduced significant amendments, no, to RA 8293, including the strengthening of the copyright legal infrastructures in the Philippines, no, to support including common licenses for copyright.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Adrian Sablan. Again, thank you very much for accepting this event. Now,
some more questions? Thank you.
Time check in Indonesia, it is now 11:40 a.m. and in the Philippines, it is now 12:40 p.m. So again, Sir Sablan, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Now, before to the third topic, we have a short icebreaker to be facilitated by my colleague, a member of NEUST ITSO, Engineer Gina Lorenzo.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. May I allow me to share my screen? So we have a short icebreaker here, wherein you were asked to give your insight about intellectual property. So you can write at least 3 insights. You are allowed to write 3 insights, and then we will be sending the link to our chat box, and then you can access this Mentimeter. I'm sure some of you you are already familiar with this. And then after that, we will be posting your answers. So just some insights about intellectual property. Okay, so thank you very much, and we will be sending the link to your to our chat box.
Okay. Again, please wait the link to our Zoom chat box, and please, to our participants, please participate to this icebreaker. And now, Ma'am Gina, can we proceed to the next presenter, or we will wait the answers of the participants?
No, sir. You may proceed to the next. Then after all these lectures, then we will post their answers.
All right. Okay. Now we are also excited to hear the best practices of the two universities coming from two countries, the Neust Philippines and the UTP Indonesia. Don't worry, it is now time to highlight our best practices. Let's start with Universitas Tunas Pembangunan, Indonesia, to be presented by our lecture speaker from UTP. She is a faculty member of Universidad Tunas and is highly experienced in agriculture. She obtained her doctorate degree from Universitas Gadjah Mada, and she has several patents in arena and is now a focal person of intellectual property at Universitas Tunas Pembangunan. The IP focal person of UTP, Dr. Haryuni.
Thank you. Thank you for previous speaker. Good information about intellectual property. Thank you. Thank you. I think I give information from Indonesia about intellectual property. Intellectual property in Indonesia, collaboration about Neust and UTP Indonesia. Intellectual property Indonesia is law number 13, Article 1 of 2016. Intellectual property is an exclusive right granted by the state to inventors for the results of their invention in the field of technology for a specific period of time to carry out the invention themselves or to give permission to other parties or to implement it. Intellectual property right consists of then and 2 patent, and 3 copyright. For industrial design, number 5 geographical indication, number 6 Indonesian electronic circuit design book, and so then trade secret, and number 8 communal intellectual property. Requirement for a creation and order for its creator to be legally protected. Number 1, fix. An idea is not protected by copyright. In order for an idea to be protected by copyright, it must first be created in the form of a tangible unity. Number 2, form. This fixation principle necessitates the existence of a specific form of work. Number 3, original. The creation must be something original, not something genuine, which means it has never existed before of is free of element of other works influence. Were protected under Article 40 Section 1 of Law number 28 of 2040 concerning copyright include works of science, art, and literature which can be divided into several types of work, namely a copyright including number 1, publication work, number 2, reproduction work in all its form, number 3, audiovisual works, number 4, drama and choreography works, number 5, photography works, number 6, musical composition works, number 7, records works. We can see copyright application flow in Indonesia from web of DJKI. DJKI if Indonesia DJKI from patent for patent. Okay, we can see from UTP to account registration. Next, select digital application. So then complete profit form. So then upload record additional data. So then payments. So then formality check. So then verification, approval application, and certificate printing. So then back to UTP certificate. We can see to registration on online application on web Directorate General of Intellectual Property or DJKI. And number 1, register, and number 2, upload file, and number 3, payment, number 4, formality, number 5, verification to approve, and the end of certificate printing. This is application flow of simple patent. This patent is two different number 1 simple patent and number 2 patent. This is different to time. Yeah, the submission process of time is different. Simple patent short time, so that patent is long time. Okay. The following type of application column needs to be included when inputting the data. Number 1, individual. Don't forget if inputting data. Number 2, regional office of the Ministry of Law and Human Rights. Number 3, intellectual property consultant. Number 4, intellectual property center uploading additional document. Number 5, regional government. Number 6, ministers and institutions. Number 7, legal entity. Number 8, educational institution uploading additional document. So then research and development center uploading additional document. So then micro, small, and medium enterprises uploading additional document. And so then other institutions. After finish, to continue the process by putting a check mark in the statement column and inputting the chapter, then a confirmation window will appear, and so should click yes. This is the example copyright certificate from me. I have to certificate copyright from DJKI. I just applied the XML document of simple patent from me. Maybe you can see a document to apply online system. Okay. Conclusion: intellectual property must be legally protected so that it is not misused. Number two, before requesting intellectual property, consider the potential that can be submitted as an intellectual property product. Number three, intellectual property ownership confers restrict on student, lecturer, institution, and other. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Haryuni, in the systematic procedure and how IP runs in your institute. Now, to share the result of the icebreaker earlier, may I call again the ITSO member, one of the ITSO member of NUST, Engineer Gina Lorenzo.
What is
Ma'am, you are muted.
Hello, good afternoon. Nakamute pala ako. So here's to share the results of the Mentimeter. Our question is, what is your idea of intellectual property? So thank you very much for those who participated in this icebreaker. So it says here, inventions, ideas, creation of the mind, original, trade secret, unique ideas, and so many more. Property of one's ideas, creative outputs of the mind, creation of ideas, implementing arts of the mind, and creation of something, mind creations for a copyright or patent, and so on. So thank you so much for your cooperation, and we will be posting this on our, we'll be using this as our documentation for this webinar. This is a very nice background. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Engineer Lorenzo. It means that is well familiar about intellectual property. And let me pause for a while. Okay, next, the best practices of Nueva Ecija University of Science and Technology, Philippines, to be presented by our fourth lecture speaker from NUST, the ITSO manager and the director of production department of NUST, Mr. Kenneth Armas.
Thank you, Sir Allen, and good afternoon to everyone, to our resource person who already gave their valuable information earlier, so good afternoon. And to our university presidents, Dr. Feliciana P. Jacoba and Dr. Teresa Shomardi, good afternoon po. And allow me to take the privilege to share with you the NUSC's best practices on intellectual property management. So I'll just give you a glimpse of our practices because I don't want to take too much of your time, and I know it's already almost 1 p.m. in the Philippines. So allow me to give you what we think the best practices that we can share to you, as well as to our partners in Indonesia. Okay. Well, the idea of protecting the IP or intellectual property in our university was started a quite long time ago. Policies were integrated on the research policies of our universities. But as the intention of our university to strengthen the research and innovation culture in our university, we realized that there's a need to balance the attention to IP management. That's why we decided to create a specialized office or designate an office focusing on intellectual property management. But we also realized that in order for us to be successful on that undertaking, we need to seek an assistance of the best office in the Philippines that can help us, which is the Intellectual Property Office of the Philippines. As Mr. Adrian mentioned earlier, NUST was successfully passed the qualifications to be included on what we call the ITSO network. So basically, that's the network or linkages or group of institutions that have designated or specific office on IP assisted by IPOPIL or Intellectual Property Office of the Philippines. So we successfully created the office, and we successfully also seek an approval of our Board of Regents. But it is not enough that we have an office. So we need to have a competent team, no, to be designated on that office. So since our university is a very diversified university when it comes to specialization, so we have specializations in engineering, ICT, agriculture, business ed, health, and other sciences. So we made our team a diversified also. So we ensure that the team that will man the office are coming from the different field of specialization. So we are composed of 7 competent team members coming from the field of natural sciences, environmental sciences, engineering, ICT, business administration, and agriculture. Well, you might be wondering what's the general function of the office. So we are mandated, or the office wants to help not only the faculty but also the students and the micro, small, medium enterprises in our province to not only to increase their awareness but to help them to secure the protection on their intellectual property. Now, because as we all know, not only faculty and students are the people that have intellectual property. The micro, small, medium enterprises, they also have intellectual property even though they don't know that they have one. No? So we want them to help by assisting them in the processing or requirements for the application, not only of trademarks, but also for patents and other intellectual property. Well, after the establishment of the office, we also realized that we need to have a strong policy. We need to have a clear policy. Though national policies or the government policies are still applicable, but we need to have an internal policies on intellectual property. So internal policies that are suitable in our operation. So we created and we successfully also seek an approval of our Board of Regents, and this is effective today, the intellectual property policies of the university or NUST. So you might also wondering, what are the salient features of our policy. So let me share to you some of the salient features that might also give you an idea what are our good practices in IP management. Well, first, under the IP policy, we promote the creation of IP, not only by the faculty, but also by the students. So we encourage the collaboration of faculty and students when it comes to IP creation through different projects, research projects, and other means to create an IP. And with also with our IP policy, we ensure that the rights of the faculty and students on the created IP will not be disregarded. Though the ownership may be on the university, but we ensure that the moral rights and the right for attribution will be remain to the creator. And at the same time, if there are commercial benefits from those IP, we ensure that the creator will also benefit from the commercialization profit. Okay. So another is, as I mentioned, the incentive for commercialization. Well, you know, we at the Philippines, state universities are always encouraged by our oversight agencies to commercialize our IP. So internally in NUST, we want also to persuade and encourage our faculty to commercialize their IP. And those research projects should not only be displayed on bookshelves or libraries, but we need to transfer it in the community and through the industry, by commercialization. And to encourage them to commercialize their IP, we secure them that they will receive the 60% of the net revenue generated from the commercialization. So imagine that if you are a faculty member of NUST and you have a commercialized IP, aside from the remuneration or salary that you are receiving from the government, you may also receive an additional income from your commercialization. Okay. So another important feature of our policy is we allow the establishment of spin-off company, which our employees or personnel may get a key position or significant position. That if you are an employee without the existence of spin-off, you cannot be engaged or you cannot take a significant position or key position to any organization while you are on your regular hours of work in the university. But with this provision, we allow them to take a maximum of 2 years leave of absence to commercialize the IP on themselves. So we allow them to take the key positions, to manage the company, and strategize on themselves on how to successfully commercialize their intellectual property. Because in the first place, we recognize that the person who might know how to commercialize the IP successfully are the creators or the inventors. Okay? Well, another best practice that we showed as the ITSO or NUST ITSO started in serving its client is the COVID-19 didn't stop us in performing our functions. Well, prior to the pandemic, we conducted a series of face-to-face or in-person capacity building trainings to our faculty and students as well. But when the pandemic hit us, as we all know, face-to-face or traditional capability building activities are not possible. So we adjusted on the situation. So we still conducted a series of capacity building awareness webinars on intellectual property in all campuses of our university. So participants are faculty members, okay? And aside from that, we assisted some MSMEs in terms of IP application. Our co-members, team members in the ITSO, provided their technical assistance in the patent search and patent application. Okay. And another best practice in our university is we want to ensure that there's a strong link between the offices involved in the commercialization and technology transfer. So what is the relationship of this one in the IP? So we also ensure that before the technology transfer or commercialization, or before we expose our IP to public, the technology will first receive its appropriate protection. Okay, so from the research office, which is the responsible and the research undertaking, so the research project, before it will go to commercialization or extension to the community, it should undergo the assistance of ITSO when it comes to IP protection. So we are ensuring that our technology will not be exploited by other individuals or institutions. And at the same time, we want to protect the right of our personnel or inventors. So they also may provide services, not only webinars, but also technical assistance on patent search, patent drafting, and application. Okay, so once the IP receive its protection, even during the application stage, it may be transferred to commercialization and extension, which are the ultimate aim of the research project, to transfer it in the community. Okay, so commercialization, which is my office, is the responsible, and for extension, another designated office for that. No? So commercialization, as our Technology Transfer Act is stating, may happen in 3 ways: by sale, spin-off, licensing. Extension may happen in customized or modality-based. But the bottom line here is all of our doings when it comes to IP research, the beneficiary should be the industry, the micro, small, medium enterprises, and the community. So we at NUST, we are maintaining and we are still strengthening the link of the research, production, and extension functions in order to better serve our target clienteles. But again, I want to give emphasis that we're doing those functions by ensuring that the intellectual property of our technologies are properly protected or adequately protected first. So those are some of the best practices of our universities that I can share to you. Thank you so much for attending our webinar, and thank you so much for listening. God bless everyone and keep safe.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Armas, our ITSO manager, for presenting the best practices of our university, especially our IP policy. I'm so proud. So again, thank you to our speakers for today. To our participants, you may now raise your questions, clarifications, queries, and recommendations to be addressed by our speakers today. If you have questions, please raise your virtual hand or open your microphone. Don't forget to mention your name and institution. I have one question here raised earlier. Presentation of Dr. Haryuni. Okay. Okay, Dr. Haryuni, this question is for you. I want to know what is the hot news for today's intellectual property in Indonesia.
Okay, thank you. From Mrs. Tia. Mrs. Tia, okay? Mrs. Tia. Mrs. Tia, okay, thank you. The Directorate General of Intellectual Property, in collaboration with Hackers Education, encourage the lecturer and students by conducting socialization or training. Because many lecturers and students in private university do not familiar register their patent or copyright. Not interest to register patent or copyright. I think it.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Haryuni. Anyone from Indonesia may add or something to add up or to share? Okay, Mr. From UTP, LPPM UTP raising his hand. Solisti Jonah, you're being recognized.
Okay, thank you. I have a question to Dr. Rakil Yoga Edi.
Alhamdulillah.
Okay. When you explain about three kinds of the patent, from example patent, simple patent, and copyright, maybe how long it's the simple patent, copyright? Maybe month or maybe 1 year. That is a different pattern. And then,
Proceed.
how about pattern microbial culture like fungus? If I have fungus, I want to be pattern microbial culture in vitro. How the process? Can I go to breed or maybe directory intellectual property in Jakarta? I think that is enough. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Is Sir Ragil is here? Or anyone from Indonesia may answer. Oh, okay. Mr. Eddie Yoga.
Sorry, I have a problem with the network here, so I couldn't hear it properly.
Okay, Mr. Solistiono from UTP, could you please repeat
I
the
repeat
question?
Again.
Yes.
When we have three kind of pattern and simple pattern and copyright, how long will be processed in a directory intellectual property in Jakarta? More is more simple, maybe 6 months or 1 year. I think are different. Sometimes it's 2 years. My patent is not have a certificate. Although that is more granted. This is the first question. And second question, how can we about patent microbial culture when you explain the fungus? I have fungus. When I must be submit the microbial culture in all territory intellectual patent in Jakarta. How can I think because the LIPI is more better in have patent in brain. Maybe you can explain to us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Pak Sulistyo. So you are questioning about how long that the process of intellectual property
Yes, exactly.
patent in the
Yes.
Directorate General of Intellectual Property. Is that right?
Yes. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I would like to answer you in two ways. The first way is the normatively, it is 30 months according to patent law, new patent law. It is 30 months. But in practically, it is the second answer, because practically it depends on the patent examiner. Because sometimes it's not the same one patent to another, so it depends on the case of the patent. Some patents are granted very fast, and some others are very long, taking a long time.
Yes.
Because maybe the communication between the inventor and also the examiner is quite difficult, and also the substance of the invention is not so easy to examine. So that's why there is no something like there is no standard of the time when the patent is completed to examine. That's the first question. I hope that
Yes.
you will answer
Yes,
the
sir.
first question. Okay, and the other question is about the patent related to microorganisms, especially fungus.
Yes. Fungus.
Yeah. Several years ago, the Director General of Intellectual Property came to us to ask for the INACC, Indonesian Cultural Collection, to be Indonesian Patent Depository Agency. Because when someone file a patent related to microorganism, the question is, when will the specimen of the microorganism used in the patent should be deposited? So that's why they came to us. But when the negotiation happened at the time, there is no standard. There is no international standard in INACC. So we need to improve the standard or the qualification of the INACC, so it will be suitable to deposit the microorganism that is patented by the applicant. So this is our homework to upgrade, the standard of the NSCC. Is that answer the question?
Okay, that is enough, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Sir Solistijono and Sir Eddie. Second question is for Sir Adrian Sablan. What are the actions of IPOPIL or Intellectual Property Office of the Philippines about or in counterfeited products being sold in e-commerce platform like Shopee and Lazada?
Thank you. Yeah, we are in that direction already. In fact, we have stronger systems now with with our IP enforcement office, in coordination with several relevant agencies to enforce IP rights. But we encourage you, if you see all of this, you come to our office and make a report, make a documentation, and our office will take action on all of this. Now, especially that, as I said, this is a newly established office, our IP enforcement office, which is by virtue of RA 10372, which provided for the establishment of enforcement office and enforcement powers for the Intellectual Property Office of the Philippines. In fact, our team is going around to do lectures already on IP enforcement and encouraging the public to come to our office and report any incidents of infringement of intellectual property rights, especially on social media platforms. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sir Sablan. That's good to hear. Okay, I think there's no more question. Thank you for participation. To all of our speakers today, thank you for the informative and interesting discussion. Thank you for your time and dedication. And now it is time to give the appreciation and award the certificates to our speakers. Again, please share the certificates now and allow me to read the citation. Okay. This certificate of recognition is awarded to Mr. Andrew Michael Ong in grateful acknowledgement of this distinguished and invaluable service rendered as resource speaker during the international webinar on property, sharing the best practice of the Philippines and Indonesia, thereby contributing immeasurably to the success and prestige of the activity. Given this 4th day of December 2021, signed by the Universities Tunas Pembangunan Surakarta and Nueva Ecija University of Science and Technology. Next. Same certificate is awarded to Mr. Peter Willemot as resource speaker. Thank you, Sir Willemot. Next. Same certificate of recognition is awarded to Mr. Ragil Yoga as resource speaker. Thank you, Mr. Ragil. Same certificate of recognition to Mr. Adrian Sablan as resource speaker of this webinar. Thank you, Mr. Sablan. Certificate of recognition is awarded to Dr. Haryuni. Let me pause for a while. Okay, is awarded to Dr. Haryuni as a resource speaker. Thank you, Dr. Haryuni. Next, same certificate of recognition is awarded to Mr. Kenneth L. Armas as a resource speaker of this webinar. Thank you, Armas. Okay. And now, finally, we come to the end part of our program. Now, to give the closing remarks, I would like to call my friend, our partner, the director of UTP International Linkages. A round of applause for Mr. Mohammad Ali Yafi.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, moderator. I believe that during this webinar, all of us has obtained a fruitful discussion. In this webinar, which main theme is intellectual property, sharing the best practice of the Philippines and Indonesia, we have learned a lot from the keynote sessions delivered by the amazing keynote speakers. Once again, on behalf of the committee, I would like to extend my deepest appreciation for delivering such important materials so that all of us can deepen our knowledge about the arena. Thank you for all the resource speakers, Dr. Marilyn Hippolito, Dr. Feliciana Yahoba, Dr. Trisna Sumardi, Mr. Peter Willie Mott, Mr. Andrew Michael Ong, Mr. Ragil Yuga Edi, Mr. Adrian Saplan, Dr. Hayuni, Mr. Kenneth Armas, and one and only Alan Paul Esteban. Furthermore, I would like to thank to all participants who have joined this conference from Indonesia, the Philippines, Malaysia, Singapore, Vietnam, Brunei Darussalam, Timor-Leste, and others. Thank you for our partner university, NUFA Ecija University of Science and Technology. I would like to mention once again Dr. Marlene Hippolito, Dr. Kenneth Armas, Ms. Sheila Morales, Engineer Gina Lorenzo, Mr. Alan Paul Esteban, Engineer Abelor Mendoza, and Mr. Darwin Reyes. Once again, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Afi. Again, allow me to extend my appreciation to Dr. Feliciana Jacoba, the president of NEST, and Dr. Tresna Sumardi, the president of UTP. Thank you very much. And to our participants, the evaluation link will be by our friends in the chat box here in Zoom. Please don't forget to accomplish this form. Your certificates will be released and sent to you after 1 week. Again, this event will not be successful without our participants and our speaker who spared their time attending this webinar. So why don't we give ourselves a big round of applause for having this day. A virtual clap, everyone. Again, congratulations.
Thank you.
Once again,
See you again.
Salamat to my fellow Filipinos. Terima kasih semuanya to our friends from Indonesia. Thank you very much, everyone, for making this an excellent event. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. This is Alan Paul Esteban, your moderator, signing off.
Mr. Yaki.
Thank you, Thank you, everyone.
Dr. Haryuni,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Terima kasih, Pak Yoga.
Thank you for all. Thank you. Terima kasih, Pak Rektor. Terima kasih. Thank you, Presidium of News. Thank you.
Mohon izin, Lab.
Thank you for all.
NUST today is continuously evolving.
In the past 110 years of the existence of NEUST, from being Wright Institute in 1908 to its present status as a university.
NEUST is a marketplace of idea.
NUST today has grown in terms of instruction, research. Development now, considering on the academic side.
It is a place where the personnel of the human resources are continuously developed in the areas of knowledge, skills, attitude, and values.
NUST is a locally responsive and internationally relevant and recognized University of Science and Technology.
The university is offering a number of programs.
Very important in the university are the human resources.
NUST went through numerous significant changes and remarkable milestones under the leadership with the institutional mission of developing new knowledge and technologies and transform human resources into productive citizenry to bring about development impact to local and international communities.
As a union, we should be the exemplar of professionalism in terms of the delivery of public service. As we all know, NEUST is a state university, and as a state university, it is funded by the government.
From a trade school to a polytechnic college to a university, NUST has gained recognition from the different bodies that has recognized its performance.
The Nueva Ecija University of Science and Technology today, with its state-of-the-art facilities, is a home to an intellectual, ethical, and visionary community. Having quality and responsive academic programs, competent graduates, excellent researchers, sustainable extension projects, and effective and efficient governance.
Everything that we do in the university, that's for the benefit of the students. And number one, of course, is for them to really acquire quality education.
I believe there are three important roles that the union should perform. One is transparency, of course, no? The operation of the university should be transparent to all the members of the union, if not for the officers, to all the members of the faculty and staff.
Kaya ang direksyon ng NUST ngayon ay maging bihasa o maging eksperto o specialize sa science and technology, at sa pamamagitan nito ay mag-contribute tayo sa pangangailangan ng locality, regional, national, at gayon din sa international.
Looking forward on how our programs, the different colleges can be center of excellence. NUST tomorrow must not be the same as NUST today.
NUST is a nest of ethical, untiring, and socially responsible and task-driven professionals who guide the youth and the community in the race towards global competitiveness.
Oh. Thank you, everybody.
Universitas Tunas Pembangunan atau sering disebut UTP merupakan salah satu perguruan tinggi swasta favorit di wilayah Jawa Tengah, khususnya di Surakarta. Kampus yang didirikan oleh ex-tentara pelajar Brigadir 17 pada tanggal 17 Juli tahun 1980 ini beralamat di Jalan Balai Kambang Lor nomor 1 Surakarta. Untuk mewujudkan visi menjadi universitas riset dan entrepreneurial yang unggul dijiwai patriotisme, kepeloporan, dan kemandirian, Universitas Tunas Pembangunan atau UTP memiliki beberapa misi, di antaranya mengembangkan dan menyelenggarakan pendidikan unggul untuk menghasilkan lulusan yang memiliki karakter patriotisme, kepeloporan, dan kemandirian. Mengembangkan dan menyelenggarakan penelitian yang unggul berorientasi pada inovasi, sumber daya lokal, dan daya saing. Mengembangkan dan menyelenggarakan pengabdian kepada masyarakat untuk berpartisipasi dalam memecahkan permasalahan bangsa. Membangun kelembagaan UTP yang kuat, kredibel, dan akuntabel.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya. Saya Tresna Triana Sumardi, Rektor Universitas Tunas Pembangunan Surakarta. Secara alamiah, Universitas Tunas Pembangunan dengan nilai-nilai triciri tadi berkembang menjadi kampus juara. Para mahasiswa memenangkan event-event kejuaraan kemahasiswaan baik nasional maupun internasional. Atas dasar itu pula, pembangunan karakter di UTP adalah dengan mendorong mahasiswa aktif mengikuti kompetisi olahraga dan non-olahraga. Hampir setiap bulan berita mahasiswa UTP menjadi juara dalam berbagai event olahraga dalam media massa dan elektronik, juga non-olahraga seperti mahasiswa Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis menjadi juara pertama dalam kebijakan publik Ombudsman Republik Indonesia. Fakultas Teknik menjadi juara dalam rekayasa beton. UTP menapaki masa depan. Di tahun 2022 kita menargetkan menjadi 6 fakultas, 24 prodi, 5.000 mahasiswa, dan 250 dosen. Universitas Tunas Pembangunan berusaha sekuat tenaga menjadi universitas swasta yang unggul di Indonesia dan di antara negara-negara ASEAN.
Universitas Tunas Pembangunan memiliki 4 fakultas, terdiri dari 10 program studi S1 serta 1 program pasca sarjana S2. Ke-10 prodi tersebut adalah prodi arsitektur dan prodi teknik sipil di Fakultas Teknik, prodi agroteknologi dan agribisnis di Fakultas Pertanian, prodi manajemen dan akuntansi di Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis, serta prodi bimbingan konseling, pendidikan kepelatihan olahraga, pendidikan guru sekolah dasar, dan pendidikan jasmani, kesehatan, dan rekreasi di Fakultas KIP. Sedangkan untuk prodi pendidikan olahraga berada di program pasca sarjana S2. Keseluruhan prodi yang ada di UTP Surakarta telah terakreditasi B dari BAN PT. Berbagai macam prestasi dan keunggulan telah diraih oleh universitas ini di berbagai bidang. Ini dibuktikan dalam 3 tahun terakhir, mahasiswa UTP telah mendapatkan 100 penghargaan kompetisi berbagai bidang di tingkat nasional dan internasional. UTP juga memiliki program unggulan di masing-masing fakultas, di antaranya prestasi atlet nasional dan internasional, serta modifikasi olahraga dan olahraga rekreasi atau tourism sport di Fakultas Keguruan dan Ilmu Pendidikan. Pertanian organik, bisnis pertanian organik dan agrowisata di Fakultas Pertanian. Arsitektur Kawasan Pariwisata dan Rancang Bangun Kawasan Pariwisata di Fakultas Teknik, serta Ekonomi Kewirausahaan di Fakultas Ekonomi. Dalam upaya pengembangan pendidikan ke level internasional, UTP mengadakan program Student Exchange antar negara. Saat ini, UTP telah mengirim dan menerima mahasiswa dari Thailand dan Filipina. UTP juga mengembangkan unit bisnis dalam menanggapi perkembangan industri, di antaranya dengan merealisasikan adanya teaching industri seperti kolam keceh, urban farming jeruk sawit, dan UTP mineral. Produk UTP mineral merupakan produk air minum mineral yang telah diproduksi dan dikembangkan oleh UTP sendiri. Dengan fasilitas belajar mengajar yang memadai, program kemahasiswaan yang intensif dan didukung dengan teknologi informasi yang unggul, serta ditunjang dengan pengajar yang berkompeten di bidangnya. Hingga UTP berencana membangun gelanggang olahraga dan seni plesungan Gondang Rejo Karanganyar. Universitas Tunas Pembangunan selalu memberikan yang terbaik untuk mahasiswanya. Untuk menghasilkan lulusan yang berkualitas, seluruh sivitas akademis berkomitmen untuk mengembangkan Universitas Tunas Pembangunan menjadi unggul dengan peningkatan mutu akademik dan non-akademik secara berencana dan berkelanjutan untuk menghasilkan lulusan berkarakter patriotisme, kepeloporan, dan kemandirian.
Okay, thank you everybody. See you again on the next occasion, and stay safe and healthy. Goodbye.
Thank you, Sir Rector. Thank you so much.
See you again. Yeah.
Yes, sir. And you can come to our campus.
Yes, of course. Sure.
You are cordially invited. Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Thank you, my friend, Sir Yapi.
Thank you.
Come to NUST. See you.
Thank you, everyone.
Maxine, hello. Hello, Maxine.